she looked so fine. Delilah, she climbed up on old Samson's knee. Said, tell me where your strength lies, if you please. And she spoke so kind and she talked so fair. Till Samson said, Delilah, you cut off my hair. You can shave my head, clean as my hand. My strength coming natural as any old man. If I had my way, if I had my way, if I had my way, I would tear this old building down. You read about Samson, oh, from his birth. He was the strongest man that has lived on earth. One day while Samson was walking along, looked down on the ground, he saw an old jawbone. And he stretched down his arm, God knows chains broke like threads. When he got to moving, 10,000 was dead. If I had my way, if I had my way, if I had my way, I would tear this old building down. And now Samson and Delilah, they got in attack. Samson, he crawled up on the lion's back. And you read about this lion, he killed a man with his paws. Samson got his hands up around that lion's jaws. And he ripped that beast, God knows it, killed him down. And the beast made honey in the lion's head. And if I had my way, if I had my way, if I had my way, I would tear this old building down. If I had my way, if I had my way, if I had my way, I would tear this old building down. I would tear this old building down.
This thing, there it is. Good morning. Couldn't tell if it was on or not. I'm kind of loud regardless, right? So, welcome, welcome, welcome. Stand on your feet with us as we open this morning with My Story, Your Glory. You know, oftentimes we have lots and lots and lots of chapters in our storybook of life, right? And I have some good news and bad news that come with our lives as we go through all those many chapters. But the good news this morning is that God can take every single one of those chapters and turn it out for the good, and he can still be glorified in his glory. Let's go with My Story, Your Glory. Story of me was a story of shame, wrong turns written on every page. So many parts that were so messed up, but I love the part where you showed up, rewriting my past, rewriting my hurt, line by line, word by word. And now my story is a living proof. There's not a chapter that you can't use. My story, your glory, my pain, your purpose, my mess, your message. In all things I know you're working. One life, one mission, one reason why I'm living. All for you, not for me. My story, your glory. Now the story of me is a story of grace, fingerprints of mercy on every page. No more ashamed of the path I took. You set me free to be an open book. Even my scars and part of your plan. Take all of my heart, Lord, here I am. My only cause till you call me home. is knowing you more and making you known. My story, your glory, my pain, your purpose, my mess, your message. In all things I know you're working. One life, one mission, one reason why I'm living. All for you, not for me. My story, your glory. All of me, all for you. Let all I say and all I do point to the one who changed my life. And let me speak the legacy I leave behind. My story, your glory, my pain, your purpose, my mess, your message. In all things I know you're working. One life, one mission, one reason why I'm living. All for you, not for me. My story, your glory. Amen. Give God some praise this morning. Welcome again to Faith UCC, everyone in person and all of those online. My name is Will Mitchell Johnson, and me and my family, we have been attending here 2.5 years only. Wow, feels a lot longer. Now that I think about that. It's been an absolute blessing to find this church and be part of this congregation. I serve on the governing board of directors. I sing every now and then up here. Help with the Next Step luncheons sometimes with a couple dishes here or there. Just kind of jump in wherever I can and wherever there's hands needed. We like to start every service with kind of our mantra that'll be up on the screen. Say it together. No matter where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. And what that means is no matter whether you lean liberal or conservative, down the middle as an independent, gay or straight, new to church or old to church your whole life, you are welcome here. In your pew, you will find 3 cards. The first one is a new here card. You'll see the little coffee cup and the QR code on there. If you're new here, or maybe you've been coming for a little while and you've never really reached out and kind of engaged, whenever you are ready, scan that QR code, enter a little bit of information for us. You'll get onto our email list and some other things if you would choose, and hopefully Pastor Scott loves to meet with everyone else, and maybe you can get to have a cup of coffee with him. The second card is the yellow card in your pew. It's our prayer card. Feel free to write any prayer requests that you have down on there. And during the second song, Micah right here has volunteered to pick up all those prayer cards during that second song. Just hold them up, wave them high and proud, and he'll come around to get those. If it is a private prayer that you don't necessarily want to share in public, just write on the top of that card, anonymous or private, and our prayer care team will still pray over that all this week. And then the last card is the kids ministry. So if you have a child with you and it's their first time going down to the kids ministry, we ask that you fill that out and walk them down, just a little bit of personal information, just so that our teachers can kind of know who is who and what parent the kid belongs to and so on. The kid belongs to the parent, vice versa, you see. Usually, though, we kind of belong to the kids half the time. So there's that. If you do not know where that is, straight out the sanctuary doors, down the steps, and you'll see the classrooms down there. And at this time, I invite you to greet one another in peace. Grant Short, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, Faith. So, as the screen says, my name is Grant Short. I serve on the kids ministry, the small groups, and the external communications team. I really enjoy volunteering here. Me and my wife, Violet Short, we have our 3 kids, Harlow, Emery, and Spencer. We thought we'd never find a church like this. We thought we were going to have to move out of state and go far away to find something like this. We did not believe it was here. And one thing that we tried to do was find something on Google. And I remember one night, me and my wife were desperate for finding somewhere that fit our beliefs and our views and everything. And we found a few churches here and there. We tested them out. They weren't practicing what they were preaching and putting up on their website. We found this one church. They didn't really have a website that was working in anything. And so we skipped over them. A year later, we come back. We're like, oh, here's this church. Their website's still broken. Are they still here? And so we found a YouTube video, and I cried. Scott's message was just the perfect thing that I needed to hear at that moment. And we're like, this is the church. And so since coming on, me and my wife can kind of volunteer to get like that digital evangelism going. And so we fixed the website. We worked on getting the SEO up and running so we could actually get people to find us on Google, because the message that is preached here and the love that we are showing is true and honest, and it is what we need. And so that's really why I serve on the external communications. As far as the kids, I love my kids, I love kids, and then I'm also very much like, grew up in a church where the kids ministry was ran by women, and only women, and that's not right. Men need to be a part of it. Our kids need to have influence from everyone, and so that is me trying to break that mold of getting mid into that ministry and to have the kids exposed to just different people. So yeah, and I think that's it.
Be still and know that He is God. Be still and know that He is holy. Be still, O restless soul of mine. Bow before the Prince of Peace. Let the noise and clamor cease. Be still. And yes, you can sing with me. Be still and know that He is God. Be still and know that He is faithful. Consider all that He has done. Stand in awe and be amazed, and know that He will never change. Be still. Be still and know that He is God. Be still and know that He is God. Be still and know that He is God. Be still. Be speechless. Be still and know that He is God. Be still. Be still.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Simmons. I am the pastor here, and I'm so glad to be here with you this morning. I want to ask you, how many of you here, by a show of hands, have had a bad boss? Bad boss, a bad boss, yeah. Starting off on a positive note. Hopefully, you don't need to start talking about them. Wow, that brings up some feelings, doesn't it? That brings up some feelings. I've had a bad boss. Probably the worst boss I had was when I was 19 years old. It was after my freshman year of college, and I joined a framing crew, that is a construction crew that does the frame of a house. And this person was a friend of the family, and I really needed the job. And this guy, at first, I thought it was great because he was really good at what he did. He was this powerful, competent individual that knew about building houses. And the work was hard. We worked 12 to 15 hours a day, which, would be enough to qualify as a bad boss. But that wasn't the thing that made him a bad boss for me. It was that his pursuit of finishing the job was more important than caring for his people. And I say that because there was twice that I felt like my life was jeopardized by his decision making. The first time was we were sheeting the roof with sheets of plywood is what you do. And because I wasn't very skilled, I was in charge of carrying these 4 by 8 foot pieces of plywood like this over my head. And a storm comes in, and it starts to get slippery up there and starts to get windy. And I think surely my bad boss is going to call us down from the roof because it's getting really dangerous, but he keeps us up there working, because we just had probably about a half hour more work to get it done. And at one point in time, I'm carrying this big piece of plywood, and a gust of wind catches it like a sail, and it drags me to the edge of this 3-story apartment building. I drop the piece of wood, it tumbles and crashes, and I see my life flash before my eyes for $8 an hour. On another occasion, I was nailing an overhang together with a nail gun in one hand and holding the wood on this other, and I shot 2 nails, one into the piece of wood and the other into my arm. And I climbed down. I was a little freaked out, and my boss comes up to me, and he says, "Hey, come here, what happened?" I said, "I put a nail in my arm, man," and he goes, "Okay, 1 second." And I think he's going to take me to the hospital. Instead, he gets paper towel, duct tape, and pliers, and pulls out the nail, wraps it up, and says, "You might want to get that looked at," which I thought, yeah. So I went to the emergency department, and they said, "Why did you pull out the nail? It could have hit an artery, and you could have died on the spot." And during this period of time, I woke up every morning with this, my alarm would go off, and it was like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Like, anybody ever been there before? Like, I just do not want to face the day that is in front of me. And I just felt powerless. And this is before my call to ministry and all that. I had grown up Christian, but I was in a period of questioning. And but I prayed, You know how you pray sometimes, even if you're not super religious, because you really need some help. And so I prayed, and God answered my prayer, and he was like, "Scott Simmons." He doesn't really doesn't really talk to me that way, but I do feel like he answered my prayer, and I felt the still small voice. And what God said to me at that time, he says, "You have power." I had felt powerless in the face of this bad boss who was so powerful, and God said, "You have power. You can change your situation. You're not stuck." I felt stuck. But he says, "You're not stuck." And I said, well, okay, God, I have power, but I need this job. And if I don't have this job, and it was connected to my tuition and all these sorts of things, and I won't bore you with the details, but I was concerned about it. And I was like, well, how am I going to find other work and time, all this? And I think God also said to me, and believe he's said this to me many, many times since then. Simply, trust me. Trust me. You have power to change the situation. I just want you to trust me. I want you to do what you can do and then trust me. Take us to the Bible now. The Apostle Paul, who we first get introduced to him as Saul, y'all. Not to be confused with King Saul, who's tall, y'all, that we talked about several weeks ago. The Apostle Paul, he is a second-generation Christian, I would call him. He's not a direct disciple of Jesus, but he comes along and he founds many of the early churches, and he writes about half of our New Testament ancient documents. And he has this protege, this younger guy that he's teaching about leadership to lead churches named Timothy, and he writes a couple letters to him. And in 2 Timothy, right at the beginning, the Apostle Paul says to Timothy, who's facing all these difficulties and all these challenges with his leadership, and he says to him, for the Spirit God gave us. And just in case you've never heard this before, I think you need to know that the Christian faith always begins with what God has done. You might have grown up in a tradition that's all about what you should do or what you shouldn't do, and it's all about this, rule following, all these things, and it feels like this heavy burden. But I'll tell you just today that I think properly understood, the Christian faith always, always, always starts with the good news of what God has done in this world and for you and for those around you. And so Paul, who's talking to Timothy, he starts off with saying, let me tell you something about what God has done. For the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid. Rather, it gives us power. And two other things that we'll talk about at the end. But if Paul is right, and if Timothy, he's just a disciple just like you're a disciple if you choose to be one, then the question isn't, do I have power? Rather, the question is, do you have power under control? Because God, according to Paul, has given you power through his Spirit to make a difference in this world, to make choices about your life and to make choices about how you influence those around you. It doesn't matter what season of life you're in, what circumstances you have. According to the Apostle Paul, you have power to make a difference. But the question is not if you have power, the question is, do you have power under control? And we're going to talk about that in today's message. We are in week 8 of a sermon series titled Love One Another, Learning to Love Like Jesus with the Enneagram. And today we're going to talk about the challenger, the 8 on the Enneagram. If you don't know what the Enneagram is, it's an ancient personality test that divides up all people into 9 types. According to the Enneagram, you have a primary type, but you're more than a type. And as you become healthy and as you become mature, you can exhibit some of the characteristics, the positive characteristics of the other types. All of us exist on a continuum of unhealthy to healthy, according to the Enneagram and most basic theories of psychology. And I've thrown a tree onto this continuum as a theological image for 2 ideas. According to the Enneagram, every single one of us, we have a fruit of the Spirit. And last week, if you were here, I quoted from Jesus where he says, he is the vine and we are the branches, and God is the gardener who prunes the vine and causes the fruit to grow. You have a fruit of the Spirit, according to the Enneagram, that comes out of you if you become healthy. You can't force that fruit to come out, but it will come out. And the way that you get healthy is you deal with your root sin, according to this theory of the Enneagram. And I like that it says root sin because it implies that the thing that really messes you up is beneath the surface. It's not immediately obvious to you. It takes some digging to understand it and to put it into view. And that's why it's so difficult. And so all of us, we have this root sin. Today we're talking again about the challenger, the 8 on the Enneagram. And the root sin for the challengers in us and among us is lust. And I always think of sex when I think of lust, but I want to give you a definition of lust because lust is not just about sexuality. It's about power, ultimately. Lust is unregulated desire that denies the dignity of others. is unregulated desire that denies the dignity of others. And I'm going to show you an example of somebody who is captured by this lust for power, that just wants things so badly that he doesn't care who gets in the way and who gets hurt. The fruit of the Spirit is innocence, and innocence is regulated desire that can trust others. Regulated desire. It's good to have desires, but they need to be regulated. And an innocent person's an 8 at their best, when they're at their healthiest, when you're at your best, you can have a strong desire, but you can also learn to trust other people. And I'll show you an example of somebody today that I think is a good example of this. So first, the bad example, which is actually my favorite biblical character from childhood. Any guesses? Don't know, if I've already told you. Samson, that's right, because I loved Arnold Schwarzenegger and Rocky and all that, So Samson. So I drew you a picture of Samson. There he is. Don't laugh at my art, that's hurtful. And the story of Samson takes place in the book of Judges. I'm going to give you a close-up of this here in a minute. But the story of Samson takes place in the book of Judges, chapters 13 through 17. And if you don't know about the book of Judges, let me put this text in its context. Thank you. Ooh, context. That's our new thing. You guys say context, and then I'll do the oohs. All right. The story of ancient Israel, a good starting place is with Abraham and Sarah in Genesis chapter 12. Abraham and Sarah, they are unable to have children, and God comes to them and says, basically, if you will trust me and do what I call you to do, I will give you a family. And they eventually trust God, and so God gives them this family that grows and multiplies. The family ends up in Egypt at the end of the book of Genesis, and while they're in Egypt, they flourish and turn into the size of a small nation. Eventually, the ruler of Egypt, after many generations, becomes nervous by their size and decides to enslave them, making them make bricks. We talked about this last week. God hears their cries under the oppression, and he sends a deliverer, a man named Moses, and Moses leads them out of Egypt in an event called the Exodus that you can read about in the book of Exodus. That's right. And when they come out of Egypt, they go into the wilderness, and God calls all the people up onto this mountain, but everybody's afraid to go except for Moses. So Moses goes up, and he starts to get the laws of God. And at first, there's how many laws of God? Anybody know? 10, that's right. But altogether, there's how many? 613. I'm turning you into nerds. I love it. There's 613. That's a lot of laws, and it eventually gets put onto these big giant scrolls, and that's hard to carry around. So God gives them instructions to make this ornate box, and the box is called the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant we talked about last week because David, King David, was dancing in his underwear, I maintain, in front of the Ark. They come into the Promised Land, and at first, Israel is not a unified nation. Rather, they're a federation of 12 tribes that are kind of loosely joined together under the rule and leadership of God. They have these enemies, all sorts of enemies, but their primary enemies are the Philistines, represented by this merman. And there's a historical reason for that. You'll have to look it up, okay? Just trust me on that. But the Philistines are constantly attacking them. And so in the book of Judges, which is the 7th book of the Old Testament, God raises up these judges, not gavel and robe judges, but these leaders to help defend the people. And so here is how the story of Samson begins. It says, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Ever hear that 40 years before? It's just a theme, right? The Bible uses these numbers. So early on, for 8s, they get the impression that the world punishes weakness. And so I'm setting the context to talk about Samson, who I believe is an 8, and he's growing up in this environment where the Philistines are ruling over them, and there's oppression and injustice. And the theory of the Enneagram, and again, the theory of a lot of psychological theories, is that your childhood forms you, both in positive and negative ways. And so somebody who is an 8 on the Enneagram, they might have grown up in an abusive household where, any sort of signs of weakness is punished, or they might have just grown up in a very competitive, aggressive sort of household. I had this friend in high school. He had 2 brothers, and their dad was a wrestling coach, and all 3 of them were state champion wrestlers. And like, if you went over to the Potter's house, like, you better be ready to throw down because it was an aggressive environment. They're probably all 8s, So the story then turns to Samson's parents who, like Abraham and Sarah, can't have children. This is another theme that plays out throughout the Bible. And an angel of the Lord comes to Samson's mom, to-be mom, and says, "You will have a son whose head is never to be touched by a razor, a Nazirite dedicated to God." And the Nazirite, there's a whole bunch of stuff there, but we don't have time for that. But here's my picture of Samson. I'm just saying it's historically accurate, okay? Long hair and beard. Okay, thank you. If you want me to do a picture of you and your family, let me know. I can do that. The angel says to Samson's mom, he will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. He's going to be this leader. And healthy 8s, and I'm not saying that Samson was a healthy 8, but healthy 8s have a high concern for the oppressed. They're really concerned about injustice. A very healthy 8 in our history, it was Dr. Martin Luther King. Some people say it was an 8, who saw the injustice and the oppression, and he was able to take the lead, and he was rather effective. So Samson grows up, and he sees this Philistine woman who's the enemy, right? The oppressors. But he's got the hots for her. And so he says to his parents, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I want you to go get her for me," because there was no dating apps back then, and so I guess you had to send your parents. And they say to him one of the more disturbing lines in the Bible, at least I think so. They say when he's like, "I want to be with that Philistine woman," they reply, "Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives?" Yeah, come on. Or among all of our people. Try not to be judgy, but yeah. And so they go down to try to get her for him. And then he's coming down a little bit after to whatever village she's from. And as he's on his way down, a lion jumps out of the bushes. Anybody can do a lion roar? Very, very good. Very good. All right. That was not practice. That was good. And the writer of Judges says, "The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson, so he tore the lion apart with his bare hands as he might have torn apart a young goat, as you do." And what's interesting is that the storyteller says that then Samson, he doesn't tell his parents about this. He keeps this a secret, which is kind of weird. You would think if you defeated a lion with your bare hands, you'd be telling everybody. But I want to play with this a little bit and just point out that 8s are part of the gut triad on the Enneagram. So all the types fit into these 3 subcategories. And each of them are motivated by different things. The head triad has an underlying motivation of fear. They're just afraid and they deal with it in different ways. The 8s are the gut triad, it's anger, that the world's not as they think it should be. And then for the heart triad, the 2s, 3s, and 4s, it's shame. So we all have this underlying motivation. And for the gut triad, it's anger, but the 8s, they turn against people, and 9s, they turn away from things, and 1s tend to turn against themselves at the end of the day. But either way, gut people, they struggle with guilt. So Samson does this thing, and he seems to be guilty, and he kind of hides it. And there's this weird thing, though. He comes back by the carcass of the lion. Some of you know this story, and there's like a hive of bees in it. And then he's such like a tough guy. He just reaches in and grabs a bunch of honey into this beehive and takes it to his parents and gives it to them. So there you go. Dead lion, killed with his bare hands, bees in it for some reason. He's getting honey. He ends up preparing to get married to this Philistine woman. And the Philistine community, they assigned to him 30 companions, which I guess are like his groomsmen. And I'm assuming that he has some sort of responsibility to give them the resources they need. And so he, instead of giving them what he needs, he says this to them. He says, if you can give me the answer to this riddle that he gives them, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes, which, just think about it. If you were getting married in modern day, you were responsible to provide the tuxedos. And so whatever the case is, he says, look, I'm not going to just give it to you. I'm going to give you this challenge. It's this riddle, and if you do it, I'll give you these things. And, clothes are really, really expensive back then, so this is a huge debt. And this is one of the things that helped me understand the 8 within me, because I'm a high 8. 8s try to relate through contact intimacy. They like a good argument. For them, it doesn't feel like an argument. It's like, we're just having a really heated conversation. This is wonderful. But those of you that are not 8s, you're like, that person is scary, or what have you. And so 8s like to relate through contact intimacy. I'm a high 8. When I got Cal and Finn as my stepsons, I was like, sweet, 2 grown boys that I can wrestle with. They're not 8s. They're not interested. They're like, get away from me. And I'm like, let's do it. And they're like, no thanks. And so, I got a high 8 in the house now. His name is Stanley, the dog. And if you push Stanley away, he's like, let's do this, But 8s try to relate through contact intimacy. When there is some sort of, contact, some sort of debate, some sort of whatever, for them, that's relating. And so maybe Samson is just trying to relate to these guys. Either way, they can't figure out the riddle. And so they start pressuring his wife-to-be to get the answer from him. And after 7 days, she keeps asking him, and she's really upset, so he finally gives the answer to the riddle, and she betrays him and tells the 30 men who provide the answer to the riddle. And now Samson is on the hook for these 30 garments. And so what Samson does is he goes down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 of their men and stripped them of everything and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. And he's really upset, and so instead of going back and finishing off the marriage, burning with anger, because anger is the underlying issue for people in the gut triad, he returned to his father's home. Sometime later, he goes back down to get his wife. And when he shows up, the father has married her off to somebody else. And he says, hey, I thought you hated her. And plus, so she's already married, but you know what? Actually, her little sister's much prettier, so why don't you go with her? This is in the Bible. Okay, read it for yourself. Samson's not liking this. He feels betrayed, and so he says, this time I have a right to get even with the Philistines. I will really harm them. Remember, lust is unregulated desire that denies the humanity of other people. And 8s, when they're healthy, they have this amazing concern for injustice. But when they're unhealthy, the passion for justice can lead 8s into the pitfalls of revenge and retaliation. And that's one of the themes of Samson's story. So here's how he gets revenge on this community that he feels like has betrayed him. It's really simple. First thing, if you want to get revenge Samson style, what you got to do is you got to catch 300 foxes, which is really not that hard, okay? Then you tie them tail to tail in pairs, and then you fasten torches to their tails, and then you let them loose in the Philistines' fields. That's what he does. I'm just saying, okay, you know how in some movies they use like embellishment or kind of ridiculous situations to draw your interest and to get a point across? Anybody, familiar with that? We're talking about like Quentin Tarantino movies will use lots of violence and other things, but then there's like kind of like a cool storyline beneath it and a point. You know that Hollywood didn't invent that. All right, so maybe he did this, but in either case, this is what happens, and it burns all the food and wine and the supplies of the Philistines, which makes them really, really angry. And whatever the case, here's the point of bringing this up. If you have an 8 in your life, don't engage in a power play with an 8. Because their capacity to go further and farther when there's a conflict is probably greater than your capacity unless you're an 8. And Samson, he takes it to the next level time and time again. In response to this, the Philistines, they kill his wife and her father. There's just all this bloodshed in the story. And he says, since you've acted like this, I swear I won't stop until I get my revenge. And he kills like tons of people in the community. Samson then runs and he hides in this cave, and they're under the Philistine rule, and this is one of the Philistine communities that he's killed a bunch of people. And so the overlords, they come to the Jewish people and they say, hey, you need to go and get Samson and get him to turn himself in. And so people from his community show up and they say, what have you done? The Philistines rule over us. Like, you need to let us arrest you and take you to them. And he says, I'll do that as long as you don't kill me yourself. And so they tie up his hands and he starts heading back to the community, and the Philistines are there. And when they're there, they think they finally have him, but Samson, he breaks the ropes like they're nothing. And he finds a donkey jawbone, and he kills like 1,000 of them, 1,000 of the Philistines. And then he sings a song. It's really catchy. It goes like this. With a donkey jawbone, I made donkeys of them. With a donkey jawbone, I killed 1,000 men. Matthew's recruiting me for the worship team. The eights are powerful. We all have power, but they're powerful people. And when they're at their best, they can be like Dr. Martin Luther King, but when they're at their worst, they can be wrapped up in revenge. And one of the eights of history, we think it was Saddam Hussein, who was a man of taking revenge on all of his enemies. I got to end the story there and just kind of fast forward through it. But if you want to know the rest of the story, which is the story of Samson and Delilah, you can read it. It's just one chapter. Or you can listen to the Grateful Dead song, Samson and Delilah, which we played at the beginning of the service today. It's not just that Adam Weaver is a total deadhead back there playing Grateful Dead. But Samson ends up getting betrayed a final time and gets his hair cut off and all these things. And he becomes captive, and he becomes, they blind him. And at the very end of his life, he's being humiliated by the Philistines. And he's at this big party, so to speak, for the Philistines that are all there. And he's leaning against one of the pillars of the temple. And he prays this prayer. He says, Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more. Let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And he pushes the pillars, and the temple collapses and kills all the people. And the author of Judges says that he killed more people in that instance than he had ever before. And I just want to point out that at the end of Jesus' life, when he's at his most vulnerable, when he's been abused and humiliated, when he's on the cross, he prays a very different prayer. He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. This story is a story about how power, if not properly regulated, can be corrupted and cause great damage. Power without control destroys the powerful, and it destroys other people. It's a cautionary tale. I'm going to take us about 1,200 years past the story of Samson to the Gospel of Matthew. And this story focuses in on a Roman centurion who is somebody who commands about 100 men. And this picture of the centurion, he's carrying a vine stick. And there's this famous centurion in history that gets written about named Lucilius, and his nickname is Gimme Another. And that's because the vine stick was what he used to hit his soldiers with to get them in line. And he would hit them so forcibly and so often, he would break the vine stick and say, give me another, so he could keep hitting. This is a centurion. This is a powerful person. You do not mess with them. And the centurion in town is the most powerful person that you just say yes to. Otherwise, you get the vine stick or something worse. The centurion comes up to Jesus and says this remarkable thing, Lord. The centurion is the most powerful person in town, but he comes to Jesus and he says, Lord, my servant lies at home paralyzed, suffering terribly. Remember, the eights, part of what makes them so amazing and why we need eights among us is that they have just this concern for the oppressed, for those that are suffering. It is no coincidence that the leader of our food pantry happens to be an 8. Jesus said to him, shall I come and heal him? because you don't say no to a centurion. The centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one, come, and he comes. And you see, those with their power under control recognize they're under the control of a higher power. And this guy he's talking about, he's under the higher power of the Roman military apparatus. But then again, he recognizes there's a power higher than that, so he comes to Jesus. And the eights among us and the eights within us, we all have power, but if we're going to have a healthy grip on the power we have in our life to make a difference, to influence the way our life goes and influence the lives of others, we have to recognize that we're under the control of a higher power. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed. The only time Jesus is amazed in the Gospels. And he said to those following him, truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great, any guesses? That's right, the name of our church, faith. I've not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. You know what faith is? Faith is the ability to do what you can do, to use your power, and trust God to do what only God can do, to recognize that you're under the authority of a higher power. Faith is action and trust. Sometimes we hear that it's just trust. And trust is a huge part of it. Sometimes what you can do is very, very little in your life. But you always do have power because God has given you power through the Spirit. But God will give you an option, and you need to do what you can do. You need to take that step. And this centurion, he's concerned about his servant. And he had access to all the best medical care that would have been available. And I'm sure he exhausted that. And then he decided to take a chance on coming to this Jewish rabbi, somebody under his thumb as an oppressed population by the Romans. But he comes with a hope that just maybe this Jesus can do something. And he has faith. In innocence, it's regulated desire that can trust others. And this centurion, he trusts others. And some of you know how the story ends, but essentially Jesus just says the word and they find out that the servant was healed. It's amazing what faith can do. I'm not trying to teach you to have some sort of superstition, some sort of magical thinking. Faith is doing what you can do and then trusting God to do what God can do and to trust that there's this higher power. Going back to 2 Timothy, the writings of the Apostle Paul, for the Spirit God gave us does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. God gives us this power, but he gives us the capability to get it under control, to use our power under control for the purpose of love. This series is titled Love One Another, and we're investigating how to love like Jesus through the Enneagram, learning to look at each other carefully so that we can love one another. And we have the power to love one another, to make a difference in each other's lives and in our world. And there's a lot going on in our world that is beyond your control, beyond your power, but you do have power to make a difference. And God gave you that power. You need to get it under control and use it for the purpose of love. And the eights among us, man, they're powerful people. But you know what? All of us have that power within us. John says that Jesus, he came to us full of truth and grace, and at the end of each of these messages, I just want to end with talking about the truth and the grace that the eights among us and the eights within us need to hear from us and hear from the Lord. So the truth is when Jesus said, "Shall I come and heal him?" And loving eights requires us to offer them cooperation. Eights are powerful people. We want eights. We want them leading. It's their gifting. What we need to do with the eights among us is offer our cooperation. The grace that we need to hear is when Jesus heard this, he was amazed. He was amazed by the faith of the eights, by their ability to trust, by their ability to see their power but keep it in regulation and understand that there's a higher power. And the eights among us, what they need is our cooperation, but we also need to give them appreciation. I was talking to an eight recently, and this eight told me that it was lonely to be an eight. And that immediately made sense to me because as I've reflected on eights, they're powerful people. They're the people we come to for help. But they're people. And they need help. And they need support. And when they need our appreciation, they need our cooperation. Let us pray. Gracious Lord, I thank you. I thank you for Samson. I thank you for the centurion. I thank you for the writers of these ancient texts that have this wisdom for us today. We thank you that you are a God that is involved in our lives that gives us power. Power to love with self-discipline, to give of ourselves in ways that are healthy, to stand with each other in ways that lift up the gifts of those around us. God, I pray for the eights among us and the eights within us, that we would know that power and that leadership and that care and concern, that we would feel that appreciation, that comes from you, and that you're amazed by the faith of the eights. Help us, Lord, to learn to trust you like the centurion does. When all is lost, to know that we can come to you and just put our trust in you. Shape us to be like that, people of amazing faith. God, we lift up the prayers of our community. We lift up a private prayer that you know of and we honor here in this space. We lift up Deborah, who's in the hospital since Tuesday fighting cancer. And we're thankful for Rod getting to come home early from the hospital yesterday. We pray for our brother Steve and his friend who he's concerned about. We pray for our community that many of us are concerned about. God, we take a moment here in silence to lift up our prayers privately to you. We finish by praying the prayer that your Son Jesus taught us, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
There we go. Stand as you are able. And our final song this morning, singing as we go forth, is Sing Wherever I Go. All my life, all I know, God's been good, good to my soul. Mountain high, valley low, I'm gonna sing wherever I go. I said all of my life, all I know, God's been good, good to my soul. Mountain high, valley low, I'm gonna sing wherever I go. God is for me, He's not against me. I will hold to the plans He has for me. When I'm broken, He will fix me. good to my soul. Mountain high, valley low, I'm gonna sing wherever I go. He's my heart song in my sorrow. He's my hope and my strength for tomorrow. And when the storms rise all around me, I will call on the name of the Lord. Here we go. All my life, all I know, God's been good, good to my soul. Mountain high, valley low, I'm gonna sing wherever I go. All my life, all I know, God's been good, good to my soul. Mountain high, valley low, I'm gonna sing wherever I go. I've got joy, 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 deep in my soul. And I'm gonna sing, 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 wherever I go. All my life, all I know, God's been good, good to my soul. Mountain high, valley low, I'm gonna sing wherever I go. All my life, all I know, God's been good, good to my soul. Mountain high, valley low, I'm gonna sing wherever I go. I mean, give God some praise. Please read your bulletins. Inside the bulletin, there's lots and lots of information for you, things that are happening and going on here at the church all throughout the week and weeks to come. Inside there, you'll see a QR code. You can scan that. If you do not have our Church Center app yet, please do so. Lots of good information. That's where you can sign up to volunteer. Lots of other things that happen in there. So please do that. This week's big thing is our food pantry. It feels a little early, but there's 5 Saturdays this month, so it kind of threw us off a little bit, me off. So this Thursday is the unload, so if you're available, please sign up in the Church Center app or show up. We can always use some extra hands. And then this Saturday will be the food pantry coming up. Generosity next, I believe? Yeah, it's an invitation to generosity. Pastor Scott, like he always says, we invite you to give. You can do that on the Church Center app. Through there, or you can give cash or check, however you choose, under the church lady on the box going out the door there. Whether you give here or somewhere else, we just encourage you to give, somewhere that your heart is drawn to, something that will be meaningful to you, and it will make a change in your life. May the grace and love of our Lord be with you today, the rest of this week, and the rest of your lives. Amen. All my life, all I know, God's been good, good to my soul. Mountain high, valley low, I'm gonna sing wherever I go. I said all my life, all I know, God's been good, good to my soul. Mountain high, valley low, I'm gonna sing wherever